Welcome, everyone, back to the Jankyard. It's JT. This time we don't have a deck tech, but we're going to talk about some of the early spoilers from Theros Beyond Death, and just some of my thoughts of how we could use them in decks, in Standard, maybe even Historic, Pioneer, maybe even Commander, and Modern. So let's chat. I've got one pulled up here. Let's start with this. Kunaros, Hound of Athreos. 1, black and a white, for a 3/3 legendary creature, Hound, with Vigilance, Menace, and Lifelink. Yeah, it's Cerberus, but it's kind of a cool one. The Vigilance, Menace, and Lifelink, that's great. I mean, it's all part of the three-headed monster. Each head brings one keyword. That's fantastic. And that alone, a 3/3 with Vigilance, Menace, and Lifelink, I'm in. I love it. But it's the rest that makes it great. Creature cards in graveyards can't enter the battlefield, and players can't cast spells from graveyards. This nerfs graveyard decks. And the biggest one I'm thinking of right now, I'm looking at you, Cauldron Familiar. Cauldron Familiar goes from the graveyard to the battlefield when you sack a food. Kunaros says, So this is obviously an answer to it. I'm excited to see this. It would also deal with a lot of graveyard shenanigan decks in Modern. But also, if you look at some of the cards that are already coming up in Theros Beyond Death, like one of the keywords is Escape. And Escape allows you to cast a card. You pay a cost and you exile a certain number of cards from your graveyard, and allows you to cast that card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Kunaros nerfs that right down, shuts it down. So I'm excited to see this. I'm excited to see how we can bring it together in a deck. Would possibly, I think, in an Orzhov life gain deck, and those are already prevalent on Arena. I don't play with one at this point, but I might be willing to now if I could shut down the cat combo. So I think this would be fun, and I'm looking forward to playing with Kunaros. The next one we're going to look at is this guy here, Brine Giant. He's been brined. He's ready for the barbecue. No, I'm kidding. It's 6 in a blue for a 5/6. Creature Giant. Stats aren't great. However, this spell costs 1 less to cast for each enchantment you control. Okay, that's better. And I'm excited because I already play an enchantment artifacts deck, the All the Glitters deck, that gives your creature the All the Glitters as an enchantment aura. You attach it to a creature. That creature gets +1/+1 for every enchantment and artifact you control. And that deck not only uses that, but it also uses enchantments like Pacifism and Lawmage's Binding and Luminous Bonds as removal. So if you've got all that, you might have a few enchantments out that this would be cheaper. And then you could slap other enchantments on to make it work. Now, the fun thing about this deck is not only do you have this as a potential new card for it, but you've got this guy. And this is Staggering Insight. It's an enchantment aura for 1 white and 1 blue, and that's it. Nice and cheap. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1, has lifelink, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So you slap this on something that also has all the glitters. Maybe a Brine Giant. It'll help get a Brine Giant out cheaper, but you could also put it on a Brine Giant. There's a lot here. So I'm really looking forward to moving forward with this deck. I love the All the Glitters deck, and I think it's got a lot more potential now that we've got these 2 extra pieces to play in it. Okay, next up, we're going to check out Galia of the Endless Dance. Legendary creature Satyr. It's cheap. It's a green and a red. Haste. Other satyrs you control get +1/+1 and have haste. Whenever you attack with 3 or more creatures, you may discard a card at random. If you do, draw 2 cards, and it's a 2/2. We'll see how much they support this. It's a Satyr Lord, so is it worth it? We'll see how much they support it in Theros Beyond Death. If there's a bunch of Satyrs, okay, this could be interesting. However, there is a number of Satyrs, there's 17 in total, that are legal in Pioneer. And so yeah, you could use this for like Boon Satyr or Fire Drinker Satyr, the Nyxborn Rollicker, Reckless Reveler. You know, there's a whole bunch of them. Satyr Wayfinder, Satyr Voyaging Satyr. So there, you know, Wild Celebrants, which when it enters the battlefield, it destroys target artifact, and it's a 5/3 for 5. So there's a lot of potential satyrs that you could use to build satyr tribal in Pioneer. And I would, you know, there is a black satyr. There's a green-white satyr from M19 that said whenever you cast an enchantment spell, draw a card. Maybe you think about that one, but I think you focus on green and red. Because the rest are green and red, the ones that are legal in Pioneer. You know, stuff like whenever an instant or sorcery spell you control deals damage to an opponent's satyr, Fire Dancer deals that much damage to target creature that player controls. Stuff like that. So a lot of the satyrs are 1/1s or 2/1s. So this would be great. It buffs them up. So I love playing tribal decks, so I'm definitely thinking that there is the potential for a good tribal deck. Now, there's only, like I said, I think there's about 15 that fit the color scheme. Might be 17 if there's a couple extra, I think, that are legal in Commander. That's not much for Commander Tribal. But if you put in some changelings to buff it up, it might work. And it's a super cheap Commander. You know, 2 mana. I mean, it dies pretty quickly, but it's cheap to keep getting it out. So that's maybe something worth thinking about in Commander as well. All right, next one we're going to pull up here is Saga. Yes, as you've probably heard, Sagas are back. Sagas were one of my favorite things in Dominaria, and I'm very happy to see them back. And here we have the Binding of the Titans. Just 1 in a green for Enchantment Saga. It's an uncommon. Each player puts the top 3 cards of their library into their graveyard. Like I was saying earlier, a lot of graveyard recursion in this set. 2, exile up to 2 target cards from graveyards. For each creature card exiled this way, you gain 1 life. It's very much like Kaya, Orzhov Usurper, the Planeswalker that does that. Except she gains 2 life. I think that's her +1. 3, return target creature or land card from your graveyard to your hand. So, yes, you're going to, in the first chapter, you're going to knock some stuff into your graveyard. Second chapter, you're going to exile some stuff, and hopefully it's going to be your opponent's stuff. And then third chapter is you'll get something back. I like it. It's solid. You can put it into probably like a green-black recursion shell, graveyard recursion shell, and there's already some good stuff from Golgari from Guilds of Ravnica. But I'm looking forward to seeing the other stuff because there is quite a bit of graveyard shenanigans already looking like it's coming in Theros. So between the stuff from the Golgari stuff from Guilds and from War of the Spark and this, we might be able to put something really neat together. So I'm looking forward to seeing what we can do with the Binding of the Titans. Next up is going to be Underworld Breach. Underworld Breach is an enchantment for 1 in a red. Each non-land card in your graveyard has Escape. This is what I was talking about. Escape is the new mechanic. Escape cost is equal to the card's mana cost plus exile 3 other cards from your graveyard. So what that allows you to do is you make cast cards from your graveyard for the escape cost. However, what is interesting is it's a one-shot. So, I mean, you only, you build like maybe a Rakdos graveyard shenanigans deck. You put a bunch of stuff in your graveyard, and you do it later in the game when you've got maybe you got 2 or 3 or 4 things in there that cost 1, 2, maybe 3 mana. And you play this. This costs you 2 mana, but you hopefully have a fair bit of mana left over, so you can play those other things from the graveyard, get them out. Because this is just a one-shot, because it says at the beginning of the end step, sacrifice Underworld Breach. So it's not going to sit out there. It's an enchantment, but it's not going to sit on your battlefield for turn after turn. It is a one-shot. So I think this might be fun to build around. I'm kind of looking forward to seeing what we can do with a Rakdos graveyard recursion deck. Or Gruul, for that matter, but probably more Rakdos. But the only issue is going to be you've got to play this late in the game. This is not something you want to see on turn 1. So it's something worth thinking about. It's definitely one of those ones like, okay, I want to build with this, but how are we going to do it? The next one we're looking at is another saga, and this is, I mean, the artwork on this is just, I don't know how to describe it. It's haunting, I think. It's Tymarat Calls the Dead. 2 and a black for a rare enchantment saga. Chapters 1 and 2 are the same. Put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard. Again, graveyard recursion. Then you may exile a creature or enchantment card from your graveyard. If you do, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. Chapter 3, you gain X life and scry X, where X is the number of zombies you control. So there is already some zombie creation in other sets in that are legal in Standard, and especially in Pioneer and Historic. So, yeah, I mean, you could do a really sweet zombie deck. You've got Liliana, Dreadhorde General, and you've got other zombie creators. The Amass, that counts the zombie armies created by Amass. So there's different ways you can create different zombie tokens and take advantage of that. And then you get that chapter 3 where you could gain 2, 3, 4 life and scry 2, 3, 4. Be kind of good. So I am excited to play with this. I think this will be fun to do up a zombie deck. Especially Pioneer. Pioneer, there's a lot of zombies. Black Zombie was a thing in Standard a couple of years ago. And I really think there's potential for that again here. So I'm excited. I'm really looking forward to seeing what we can do with Tymarat Calls the Dead. Now, speaking of black cards, here is Erebos Bleak Hearted. 3 and a black for a 5/6 legendary enchantment creature god. He is indestructible. Now, the one issue with Erebos is as long as your devotion to black is less than 5, Erebos isn't a creature. Whenever another creature you control dies, you may pay 2 life if you do draw a card. So you don't mind stuff going to the graveyard. Then 1 of the black, sacrifice another creature. Target creature gets -2/-1 until end of the turn. So that's a way to hose your opponent's stuff by sacking one of your things. This would be fun, but especially in a black devotion deck. And we've got a couple other ones to talk about here that are important for that black devotion deck. And let's talk about the biggest one of all, Gary, the Gray Merchant of Asphodel. This is a reprint. Gary is a classic. Yes, it's gray. People call it Gary. I picked up on that a while back. It's a nickname because if you look at gray and you look at it kind of quick, your mind's eye might transpose the 2 middle letters and you see Gary instead of gray. It's kind of cool. So Gary is wonderful. 3 and 2 black for a 2/4. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent loses X life, where X is your devotion to black, and then you gain life equal to life lost this way. You play a mono black deck. There are lots of cards. There's some 3-pip stuff like Ayara, the Cavalier of Night. By 3 pips, I mean 3 black mana symbols. And your devotion counts all the mana symbols you have in the cost of your permanents. And then there's a bunch of 2 mana symbol costs, such as Murderous Rider, which would only count the cost of the creature, not the other cost. But the point being is you would get there's a lot of potential here for a great mono black deck, and then that would be greatly appreciated by Erebos because your devotion would be up fairly high, and he would be a creature instead of just an enchantment. So, yeah, I love seeing Gray Merchant Asphodel because you got a big devotion, you come out and you just, boom, hit your opponent hard with a big drain, and yeah, I think it would be great. So I'm excited to play with Gary. And then there's one other card here that goes with the devotion deck. Oh, it's this guy here. Underworld Sentinel. 3 and 2 black for a skeleton soldier. It's a 4/5. When it attacks, exile target creature card from your graveyard. And when it dies, put all cards exiled with it onto the battlefield. So the reason I like it with Gary is just, yeah, you're probably have a few cards you're getting exiled, and you can just put them all back on the battlefield, and that will just boost up your devotion, because if you're playing mono black, then they're going to be black, and then you play Gary and hit your opponent for a whole whack load. So I quite like that one. All right. Some other ones that have been out for a little while, but I still haven't really talked about them and I want to talk about really quick. The first one I want to look at right here is Allure of the Unknown. 3 in a black and a red for a sorcery. Reveal the top 6 cards of your library. An opponent exiles a non-land card from among them. Then you put the rest into your hand. Okay, 5 mana to put 5 cards in my hand. I like it, but 5 mana to reveal 6 cards and the best one goes to my opponent. And it says that opponent may cast the exiled card without paying its mana cost. So the big thing with this that I want to play with is, how do I get that card back? Because they may control it if it's a permanent. If it's an instant sorcery, I'm not getting it back. That's not happening. But if it's a permanent, like an enchantment or an artifact or a creature, they're getting to keep it, and they control it, but I still own it because it comes from my deck. So I think the one that came to mind that would be good to play with it that's currently in Standard is Trostani Discordant. And it says, at your end step, each player gains control of all creatures they own. So if it's an enchantment or an artifact, not going to work. But if it's a creature that your opponent took from you, then at the beginning of your end step, you would get it back. And back on the battlefield would come over to you. The problem with this is Trostani Discordant is green and white. And this is Rakdos. This is black and red. That's a 4-color deck you're talking. And, I mean, I like playing 5-color decks, don't get me wrong. But that's pretty risky. So, maybe there's other cards I need to dig deeper that might help get it out in Pioneer or Modern. But certainly that's your big thing, is you want to find a way to get it back. And to have it return to your side of the battlefield. Or even your hand, but to get it out of your opponent's. Get it off your opponent's battlefield. So that's something that's definitely, it's going to be something to be built around, but I'm really interested. I think it could be a lot of fun. Okay, this is a fun one, because it is it's a tribal card of tribes that just don't get a lot of respect. And this is the Serpent of Yawning Depths. I'm excited to play with this one. It's 4 and 2 blue for 6/6. Enchantment creature Serpent. And Krakens, Leviathans, Octopuses or Octopi. And Serpents you control can't be blocked except by Krakens, Leviathans, Octopi, and Serpents. There's not a lot to build with in Standard. Pioneer, yeah, there are more cards to play with. I think Thing in the Ice is a Kraken Horror. So you could certainly play with this. Traditionally, these guys are, like, Kyora's Dambreaker is currently is one that I can think of off the top of my head, is I believe it's a Leviathan, and it's currently in Standard. So I mean, these guys are traditionally kind of big, both power and toughness and mana cost. So I think if you build around it, you can do kind of a tribal, but you need some stuff at the low end of the curve. And maybe it's all removal and counter magic and board wipes, but it needs to be something so you can get to these bigger creatures. And one thing to think about, Stonecoil Serpent, currently in Throne of Eldraine, which is a great card. They X mana artifact creature that gets X counters on it, where X is the number of mana you cost to cast it, or mana you spent to cast it. Even though its name is Stonecoil Serpent, it's a snake. Its creature type is snake, not serpent, so it would not be impacted by the Serpent of Yawning Depths. Just something to keep in mind. Because I was looking at it like, oh, we could play the Stone Cold. No, we can't. Something else to play. This guy. Death Bellow War Cry. There is no Minotaur deck in Standard. There is a potential Minotaur deck in Pioneer. And in fact, I played against it. A friend put it together and played it at our LGS. And it's pretty solid. The problem is the Minotaur decks like to try to go somewhat quick. I mean, there's some of them are 4 or 5 mana. But to get to 8 mana is pretty rough. So this requires a lot of building around, and I want to look at it, but it has potential in Pioneer. And it would just be hilarious. Just to go through your library and like, okay, where are my 4 best different Minotaur creatures? Here. Blah! Just vomit them out onto the battlefield. But the cost is the big problem. So it's worth looking into. This maybe is more of a commander thing, because you can definitely put together a good Minotaur commander deck. And 8 mana, while it's not cheap in commander either, usually with a lot of the artifacts and other mana ramp that you often find in commander, this will definitely be cheaper. So it's worth thinking about more for commander, but it would be fun. The next guy we want to talk about is Daxos. Daxos is one that's been revealed for a little while. Daxos, Blessed by the Sun. White. A legendary creature, legendary enchantment creature, demigod. It's a 2, and then its toughness is equal to your devotion to white. I would definitely want to play this probably in a mono white deck. Maybe a white weenie, but I mean, there's some with 2 or 3 mana symbols like Benelish Marshal, if you're playing in Pioneer, has 3. In Standard, Tomic the Advocist is just 2 white symbols. Also currently in Standard, the Cavalier of Dawn, I believe, the White Cavalier, also has 3 mana symbols. So that would be strong. It would work in that kind of deck. However, I was thinking I'm going to see if I can make this work once we get to either Standard or Pioneer. I'm not sure which. Is splashing blue mainly for high alert? Because otherwise, if you get a bunch of white creatures and you're just splashing the blue for the high alert, say you've got 7, 8 devotion on the battlefield with it, and this guy gives you 2 already, so he's automatically a 2/2. But if you get a few others and suddenly it's a 2/10, 2/9, and you can definitely find some good white creatures with 1 or 2 mana symbols that are 0/3s, 0/4s. I mean, it's just one in a single white mana symbol, but from this is legal in Pioneer from the previous trip to Theros, Nyx Fleece Ram. It was an 0/5. So, I mean, it loves high alert. Daxos would love high alert as well because it would be swinging with its toughness. And if you've got a high devotion, it could be swinging for 8, 9, 10. So, I'm really excited by the idea of a potential Daxos Big Butts deck. Because as some of you know, I'm a big fan of the Big Butts decks, which those are the decks that you swing with your toughness, because the toughness is the back number. If you look at the 2 numbers, it's the second one, it's the back end number, hence the term Big Butts, because it usually have low toughness, low power, and high toughness. And Daxos could very well be like that. So I'm excited. I like the idea. And lastly, the last one I want to talk about has been one of the big focal points of this set. There she is. The Return of Ashiok. Ashiok Nightmare Muse. 3 and a blue and a black for 5 loyalty legendary planeswalker Ashiok. Okay. Not cheap to get out by any stretch of the imagination. But I feel that there's a good mill deck. Certainly a good mill deck in Pioneer. But definitely I think there's one in Standard. And this is just going to make it better. The +1 is created a 2/3 blue and black nightmare creature token with whenever this creature attacks or blocks, each opponent exiles the top 2 cards of their library. Then, -3, return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand, then that player exiles a card from hand. That's a good way if your opponent is empty-handed. Like, oh, here, take that one back, and now you got to exile it. I really like -7. Now, it's going to be hard to get to, but you start at 5 loyalties. So this is really, you could hit this on your third turn after playing Ashiok, or your third activation after Ashiok. You may cast up to 3 face-up cards your opponents own from exile without paying their mana cost. So with that +1, you might exile a few cards. But the thing that you can really combine her with is the other Ashiok, the Ashiok from War of the Spark, who has the -1 to mill target players' top 4 cards from target player's library into their graveyard, and it doesn't care who. But then it says opponent exiles their entire graveyard. So if you can, we use her, target your opponent. Get top 4 cards from their library into their graveyard, and then boom, immediately exile it all. And then if you get to the -7, the ultimate here on this Ashiok, you get to play with any of those. So, ultimately 3 of them, but it gives you a much greater selection. So I'm really excited with the potential of both Ashiok Nightmare Muse in a mill strategy, and also in a strategy where you're using your opponent's cards to get them. So there we go. Those are the early spoilers I've seen, and there's lots more to come. Those are the ones I'm really excited to see played, and I look forward to having fun with them. So thank you, everybody, for joining me here at the Jankyard. I've been JT. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and also check out our website, jankyardmtg.com. Follow us on social media at jankyardmtg, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And check out our stream at least twice a week, Wednesdays and Sundays. And plus we will often stream on other days too. And that's twitch.tv/jankyardmtg. So thank you once again for this look at the early spoilers from Theros Beyond Death. I've been JT, and thank you for coming to the Jankyard.